All right, and we are here on live with J.R. Layne. J.R., thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me, Jessica.
So I so appreciate this. You are in Vermont, correct?
I am. I'm in Bellows Falls, Vermont, which is kind of like in the southeastern corner of the state. It borders New Hampshire and Massachusetts.
Okay. Okay. And how long does it take you to drive to New York City?
I guess it'd probably be about 4 or 5 hours. 5 hours, maybe. Yeah.
Okay.
Probably about 5 hours.
Still pretty close.
Depending on what borough I'm going to, where in the city.
Yeah, it depends on the time of the day, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, I would love to, because you've been through quite a bit, and I would love for you to start, bring us back to where you grew up. Like, where did you grew up in the States?
I did.
And yeah.
I did. I grew up on in a small shoreline town of Connecticut, about a half an hour north of New Haven, right at the mouth of the Connecticut River. Really beautiful there. But I was born in Queens, New York, and I was very fortunate as well. I'm the fifth child out of 6. I have 5 siblings, 5 sisters, and I was really fortunate because my father did really well vocationally. So materially, we were never in want for anything.
Right.
I had a privileged life in that respect. And
5 sisters, wow.
That, yeah, 5 sisters, and I'm the 5th child. So I have a baby sister, but I was always treated more like a baby.
So you're the only boy? Is that?
I'm the only boy.
The only boy, yeah. Wow, geez. Can't even imagine.
And my father's side of the family, he also had 5 sisters and 1 brother.
Okay.
And I believe my uncle was a half brother. So
okay.
Yeah, like
wow.
father was.
Sure, you have some stories around that.
Many. Many. We don't have the time.
Can't even imagine.
Yeah.
So I didn't know you were originally from Queens. I thought you were from Vermont originally, but okay, you're from Queens, yes.
Yeah, I ended up in Vermont incidentally. That was at the birth of my 2 13-year-old sons. They were born in Dartmouth, New Hampshire, which is right on the border of Vermont. And they were in the NICU for the first 6 months of their lives. So, making the move was kind of forced upon me and their mother. And so we chose to live in Vermont at that time. And we've been here ever since.
Wow, okay. Got it. So you grew up with your siblings, your 5 siblings, and both parents?
Both parents were in the house, yeah. Although my father worked so many hours, he was absent, even so. Like, we may see him in the morning during the weekends, but in the evening, maybe, we'd be lucky to be able to get a couple hours at it. In my younger years, when I was way young, we all ate as a family. We did that whole family supper thing, and we did see a lot more of my father at that time. But as his profession, as he moved on in his profession, he became less and less available.
Okay. And so when you were home with all of these females in the same household, what were things like? Like, were you bored? Were you like, let me get out of here? Or did you have a close relationship with your sisters?
Yes and no. But things were never bored, that's for sure, because I was probably one of the most mischievous children. In my radar, I can't really think of any other kids much more mischievous than I was when I was young. I was always into something, always. And I was hugely energetic, so, and very athletic. So I was always playing sports, throwing the ball. Even before I joined any organized teams, I was throwing balls in the house, breaking windows, getting in trouble.
Wow.
I'd make a couch pillow into a football one way or another,
Whatever you could find. And did your sisters treat you well, being the only boy?
It kind of, they all treated me well. Let me just get that out there. But my relationship with them was very different, with all of them, and it was mostly relative to where they fell on the age spectrum. My oldest sister is like a decade older than me. I think maybe 11 years possible.
Okay.
She was more of a maternal figure than a sibling. And
Yep.
then there was my two sisters that were closest in age were like my peers, more or less. My little sister was a menace to me, a pain in my ass, if you would. You know, that grew up into a pretty strong bond with us.
Mm. And when you were growing up, did you guys all stay together in one home pretty much?
For the most part, yes. Yeah, until my older sisters began to kind of branch out and do their own
Yeah.
thing, starting with the second born, my sister. Um, she moved out first. And in fact, later in life, that would prove to be a, kind of a solace for me because I was able to live with her for a short period of time. I can no longer live with
So
her.
when
And
you were growing up,
that
yeah.
kind of gets into into where things went wrong.
So what was that point like? Because you're growing up, you know, went from Queens to Vermont. Sounds like you had a great childhood. You're surrounded by a lot of family. You guys were close and you know, just normal family things going on. And then what was the turning point for you? Like, where did things go? Let's say, call it sideways.
Well, I guess it was something that was kind of like building up in my childhood from birth. My father, my relationship with my father was always a contentious one because I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that I was his only son,
Yeah.
and he was I think he had clear visions as the type of man he wanted me to be. Um, you know, not giving my personality any kind of respect as far as I was concerned, and he was also, you know, he's a first generation American, and he comes from a Caribbean family. His parents, my grandfather was Barbadian, and my grandmother was Jamaican, and you know, familiar to those cultures, discipline is kind of rigorous, you know,
Yeah.
and I think he took it a little too far with me, but it is what it is. Anyway, I grew up, and when I got to the age where I was getting kind of sick of that physical discipline, which happened way too frequently, because as I said, I was mischievous and I was always getting in trouble, and that was my father's way of discipline. When I got to the point where I was getting kind of older, around 12, 13, and starting to fight back, well, it just became impossible not to be any kind of. And it was decided at that point that maybe I needed to go move in with my sister, which I alluded to earlier. And so that's what I did.
So at 12, 13, you thought, you know, like whatever he did, like you just didn't want to take any more of it and decided to stand up for yourself.
Yes.
Got it.
Yes. And what that amounted to was a extremely hostile, volatile, and many times violent environment for all the other members of the household. And mind you, my mother and four of my sisters at that time were still home.
Right.
So it was a
Okay.
full
So
house.
they were witnessing this.
They were witnessing.
And what was the impact on them? Have you guys talked about that, or did you see the impact on your sisters and your mother?
You know, with each sisters, it had a different impact, but all across the board, it had a real negative one. And I think they struggle with their memory of my father more so than I do, because of it. Yeah, so I mean, they watched. It didn't happen to them. You know, he didn't treat them that way, and so they
Yeah.
watched me being physically beat for up to that point my entire life for the most part. My earliest memory, I was like 5. I was still in Queens, of him towering over me and coming down with a strap.
Hmm.
You know, so they were watching that for a long time, and they had built a pretty solid resentment towards him.
Okay. Is he still around?
No, he passed.
He passed. Okay. Um, so your sisters were witnessing this, and so all this time this is happening for you, did you see it as his way of showing love, or as a young boy you were just not liking it and building up resentment towards him?
I think somewhere in my 30s. I mean, you know, when we're talking at the time that this was happening, I hated my father with a passion as strong as any child can hate their parent. Um, but in my 30s, when I started to kind of reconcile where I was finding myself, and how meaningless my life had been up to that point, and how full of destruction it. I started to seek help kind of in my 30s, and right around that time, obviously, I had a lot to deal with in terms of my relationship with my dad and his absence in my life, and nothing to do with the man I became in the end, which
Yeah.
I think is a sad irony.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of reconciling, and I was able to do it, but it took a long time.
So was it this experience with your father that had you turn to drugs, or was it other things?
It was the beginning of that. Beyond that, after that, I was in my mind at the time that I left home for the first time. I was 14 years old, and the way that I internalized that was I was being rejected from my family. I was being kicked out of my home.
Right.
I was going to live with my sister, so obviously I was with somebody who loved me and I was familiar. But that didn't take away from the fact that I had been I perceived it as me being kicked out of my house, my childhood home, my parents, my mother. I had to leave my mother and all my friends that I had grown up with, and all the activities that I was doing in school, etc. And so basically, I was able to deal with that by just being completely, pretty much making this resolution that nobody cared, nobody loved me, and so I was on my own. And for a 14-year-old to make that decision, they have no capacity at all to live on.
Yeah.
So all the subsequent tragedies that happened thereafter made perfect.
So as a teen, so then what happened? Did you stay at home when after you turned to drugs? Like as this was continuing on, were you still in the house with your sisters and mother?
So at that point, I was everywhere. No, my sister eventually got to a point where she couldn't handle me anymore.
Okay.
Because, as I had alluded to also, any kind of authority was no authority to me. And that's kind of my attitude. I do what I want to do when I want to do it, and I really didn't give a crap about anyone that stood in the way of that.
Yeah. Your way or the highway.
That was it. And now, mind you, this is coming from the mindset of a child with,
Sure,
again, no capacity and no life skills to live on his own.
Yeah.
There I was. And so after my sister kicked me out, I went back to Connecticut for a little bit, to the family home. Now, I'm older, I'm stronger, I am more prideful and more full of arrogance and rebellion, that there was no way my parents could any longer. And so basically I just brought a lot of disturbance back home, so that didn't last. And then from there I was couch surfing and, staying where I could.
Yeah. It's interesting now having this conversation where I'm a parent, you're a parent, and I have my kids are teenagers. I have 3 teens, and I remember being that age and being a young adult, and at the time we feel invincible, and we don't give a shit. It's our way or the highway. We're gonna do what we want. And then now knowing like, geez, our brains are not even fully developed until about the age of 25.
Not even close.
We have no reasoning. Like we can't even, no matter how wise we want to be or how much we read, like the brain has no capacity to fully reason like an adult.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And physiologically too, we're hardly developed at all. I mean, we have a lot more growing to do, and that's just at the place when our sexual organs are starting to do their work, and then that adds to the cauldron, if you would,
exactly,
of complete poor decision making. And
exactly. I was going to say complete shit show at times.
I was trying to be polite. I've been trying not to curse, Jessica.
Oh man, good times. So you, so you go back to the family home and like what? So you continue. How long were you addicted to drugs? What was the total amount of years?
I mean, I was addicted to. I was an active alcoholic for 35 years.
Okay.
Probably around pretty much about the same amount of time for using drugs. That's not true. I actually put down drugs quite a long time ago. But I'm still an addict. So, I mean, that started when I was 16, the
Right.
drugs.
Right.
Um, it,
You
it,
know, we hear so much about relapse, right? Like people who are addicted, they relapse, and this can go over a span of many, many, many years. What was the final straw for you, where you're like, "This is it. Like I can't keep going back the way I doing things. Like this is it. I need to turn my life around."
I got arrested for domestic violence. I was in jail. I was 48, and my children witnessed me being arrested, and I was forcefully being separated from them.
Mm-hmm.
And and that's when I really started taking a long, hard look at where I was, how I had gotten there, and the type of man I had become.
Right. So it was your sons. You have twin boys, right?
I have twin sons, yes, Adrian.
Yeah. So they became your why, essentially.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. And it didn't take long though, Jessica, for me to realize that that wouldn't sustain the why, so to speak. That wouldn't sustain any type of recovery that I was starting to enter.
Yeah.
Um, that was also part of the revolutionary change I was experiencing, where I had to take also a good hard look in the mirror and decide, um, is that who I want to be, or do I want to be someone else? I mean, really, at the end of the day, how many drug addicts and alcoholics are actively using with children and not even in their radar to stop, right?
Yeah.
The love we have for our kids is often not strong enough, and it certainly wouldn't sustain recovery.
Mm. Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up. That's powerful, because also there's a lot of people that may be listening that don't have kids, because I've heard these stories of like people who are in drugs are on drugs, or there's their turnaround is their child or children. Um, but I think that was pretty key, that you said it can help you like maybe a first step, but it's not going to sustain you, right? And then there's people, because there's people that may look at this and other people they hear and say, well, I don't have kids, right? And I'm just sharing from my experience of talking to other people that have children and said that that's been their turning point. And I don't want people that don't have kids to look at it like, well, I don't have kids, so like, am I screwed? Or like, what else can I do?
Yeah.
What is a strong enough anchor for somebody like you now work with people who are addicted. What is something that you tell them, like if they're struggling with relapse, what do you say to them to help them like really turn things around? Like, this is it.
Whatever it was that brought them to their knees and made them feel like they had hit bottom was merely a catalyst to get them into my office, or to get them to a place where they're asking for help. That whatever that catalyst is, it's not going to sustain their recovery either. I make it very clear to them that this is now the work begins. Now the real work begins. Now that you put down the bottle, you put down the needle, you put down the crack pipe, you stop exhibiting radical behavior and committing crime. You really make a resolve to change your life. That's just the very first step. And I try to, and because I'm such a visual person, I try to draw these pictures for them to see. And that to me is there's this huge stairwell by my house, right? You leave my house, you get onto the street, you walk about I don't know 20 yards, and then it's the top of a staircase that goes down like 100 steps. Huge. And it's daunting when you're going up those steps. Believe me, especially at 50. So you get to that first step and you just look up and you see the entire staircase, right? And it's so intimidating, it's so daunting, and that turns people around. But I tell them, you got to just look at what's in front of you. Look at the step that you have to take right in front of you, and then take the next one, and then take the next one. And it's going to be a lot of work, but you'll make it to the top. And I think that's when when the people I work with really show some signs of recovery, that they've healed.
Yeah. So one step at a time instead of looking at the whole staircase.
Yeah. And in that process is therapy. It's, it's a lot of self-evaluation. It's rebuilding relationships. It's doing a lot of reparation. And so emotionally, they're just raw for the first year of their recovery. That's what it takes.
Doesn't sound fun, to be
It's
honest with
not.
you. No.
It's not. But neither is chemotherapy, right?
Yep. Exactly.
And so if you get diagnosed with cancer and that's what the doctor says you need to do, you got to do it.
Yeah.
And you're gonna lose like 100 pounds. You're gonna have bed sweats, and you're gonna be puking, and you might even be shitting yourself, and you're just gonna feel miserable. But that's what you have to do to survive it. And a lot of people, because they go through that process, their cancer goes into remission.
So do you find then a lot of when the people with relapse, it's because it's too hard, perhaps, like where it's just like, whether it's a year or two, or even within a year, I see people relapse within a few months. Do you think that's what gets in the way, where it's just too hard to take that first step, as we used with the analogy? It's too hard to repair relationships, to to do what it takes to start to put their life back together, and it's just easier to go back to what they were doing before.
Well, in my case, Jessica, it's like a 14-year-old mind is a very undeveloped mind, emotionally undeveloped, intellectually undeveloped. And they say that when a person starts abusing drugs or other substances, that's kind of when their emotional intelligence stops, if they start using as a child. And it's kind of the same way. So think of having the resilience of a child. Like you and I both know, we've survived things and we've recovered from things that require a lot of resilience. But a 14-year-old, and when a person in early recovery, they're still at that emotional mentality. Their first instinct is to hide the pain, is to cover the pain, is to stop the pain, the source of the pain. And the best way to do that when it's a deep-rooted emotional pain is to get outside yourself through the use of another substance. And so the hardest part, it isn't that it's hard work, because you and I and people like us have a lot of resilience. We can handle the hard work. It's the pain.
Yeah.
It's the pain that work, that's involved with doing that work. The emotional pain, the shame, the remorse, the guilt. Because we're not bad people, right? We're not bad people. We're sick people. We're not bad people trying to get good. We're sick people trying to get well. And so when we're sober long enough to start remembering all the bad things that we did because of our illness, it comes with that a lot of shame and a lot of guilt, and a lot of remorse. That's overbearing. I think that's the primary reason for relapse.
So, and when you look back at your life, do you have anything that you regret, or that you still hold resentment towards?
Okay, well, the first part of that question, I'm like, are you serious? Really? Yeah, so much. We don't have time in this interview to go over all the things that I regret. Okay. The resentment, that's something different. The primary resentment and the primary loathing that I ever experienced was geared towards me. It was directed towards me. It was that guy in the mirror that I just could not tolerate, not stand. And that's where it began. That's kind of where that came. In terms of getting, unburdening ourselves with the resentments that we carry, because that also, that'll lead us back to the drink or a drug typically. But I don't have resentments today because I've done the work and I've gone through that. Once I got over hating myself, I was able to look at my other relationships and any resentments that were associated with it and start to work on that and start to see what I brought to the table and hold myself accountable and then try to make amends. That's what I teach my guys. Hopefully.
Yeah, for sure. And what does forgiveness mean to you?
Forgiveness means letting go to me. It's really just the opposite of a resentment, right? Because you're holding on to something that happened. You're holding on to it, that somebody slighted you or somebody hurt you, stole from you, whatever the case may be, that you have a resentment towards that individual. Typically, we just hold on to that, and that just eats us like a cancer. And I think forgiveness, what it means to me is letting go. Really just letting it go.
Yeah.
And that means towards the people that have hurt me. And that also means giving myself a break, letting go of the wrongs that I had done. Do everything I can to make right, and make amends for those wrongs, and then definitely pay that forward. So I live by the mantra, do no harm, you know?
Yeah.
That's really
Beautiful.
what it means.
Yeah, beautiful. You earlier you caught me off guard when you said, when I was 48, but I was like, all right, I'm like, did I just hear 48? Because you don't look like you're past the early 40s. So I'm like, what?
Ah, flattery. Good. I love it.
I was like, what did you say, 48? So as you kept talking, like, did you just say 48?
Yeah, I'm actually 50.
Yeah, you mentioned later. I was like, what? Crazy. Could have fooled me. And I'm usually good with telling people's age.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I hope it lasts long enough for me to enjoy my children's youth, as I'm still repairing those relationships.
Yeah. And they're how old now?
They're 13.
13. Okay. And do you have a close relationship with them, or how is that going?
Right now, it's in reparation still. I mean, I haven't even talked to them since I was released from prison,
Right.
unfortunately.
Okay.
But, that doesn't stop me from being the man that I would like them to be. That doesn't stop me from walking as if they were right next to me, watching my every move. The best way I can be a dad right now is to be a powerful example, and for them to see as much as possible that I'm not that scary guy that they probably remember of our last encounter. That I love them dearly, and I would do anything for them. That I was a very sick, suffering alcoholic.
Yeah. That is beautiful. That is beautiful. Thank you for sharing all of that. Is there anything else you would like to share? Time wrap.
Yeah, definitely, Jessica. This to me is so important. You really can't articulate how important, because so many sick and suffering individuals out there right now need the support of their community and wraparound services that are provided within their community, and the empathy for people, hopefully the people that will be viewing this, that empathy where not that they feel sorry for, but they get it. They get it that these people are behaving in the way they are because they have an illness that needs to be treated, not to be caged like an animal and discarded. And I think of we didn't really get into any kind of judicial reform conversation, but the bulk of my work, besides working with individuals that are re-entering the community from being incarcerated that suffer from substance use disorder, is also on the front of establishing patterns of restorative justice within our court system, and really initiating a systemic change, because people are not cattle, and they deserve the time and the love and the nurturing to get them so that their families stay united, their children aren't being passed the generational trauma that was passed down to us, and create a better future for them.
Yeah, 100%. It's beautiful work that you're doing after everything that you've been through, and now you're able to give back, and you're wanting to give back to other people who are going through something similar to what you did. If somebody is listening, do you only serve guys in the Vermont area, or what's your?
Yeah, because this COVID-19 thing is going to last forever, right? So,
hopefully not.
I came back into my office to have this interview with you, and it feels so comfortable. I miss it, and what I miss is not sitting at a desk and doing work. What I miss is the interaction, the human interaction. Yeah. We're social creatures. We belong with one another and supporting one another and boosting each other up. And I miss that. So to answer your question, only people in my region that need my help in terms of direct service work. for this type of work that we're doing, you and I right now, and some other projects that I'm working on, there are no borders, right? Just passing the message to all of our communities,
Yeah.
That this is a problem that won't go away without love and empathy.
Exactly. Exactly. Will you, or what's the best way if somebody is in the Vermont area? Like, is it just like an open thing where they can get in contact with you, or what's
Um,
the best way to reach you?
as a recovery coach, if it's a person in early recovery seeking to sustain long-term recovery and want to be coached, then they would reach me through Springfield Turning Point in Springfield, Vermont.
Okay.
Look that up. This is just Springfield Turning Point and make sure it's a Vermont, because I'm sure there's another Springfield Turning Point out there. And you can find me through that website.
For sure. All right. Beautiful. Well, thank you so much, JR.
My
That was
pleasure.
really, really, really great. I don't know how to, usually, this is just being raw. Usually I like to turn off the interview and then continue speaking, but I can't figure that out right now with tech stuff. So I'm going to say my goodbyes right now.
Okay.
But I
Okay.
appreciate you. Again, just like, thank you for being the light that you are in this world. I'm so glad that you're still standing. There's a bigger reason for you still standing and being here. And, you're being an example for your twin boys, even though you share that physical distance right now.
Well, thank you. And ditto, right back at you. I echo all of that. And the work that you're doing is so amazingly important, especially the demographic that you work with specifically. That's young men like myself, of color, that have been involved in gang violence, street violence, and drug substance use disorder, and have gone to prison. When inside of us is just a little boy wanting to be loved and wanting to be understood, and then when that happens, magic is we give back to our communities in a way that we never could have before.
Yeah.
So thank you for the work that you do. And your book,
It's
Flip the
my
Script, was
pleasure.
amazing. Amazing. Touched me in so many ways.
I'm so glad you read it. I'm so glad you read it. I'm still waiting on a testimonial, by the way.
Okay, that's coming.
Perfect. Thanks so much, JR.
Thank you, Jessica.
Talk soon.
Bye-bye.